today we have Nikita with us. Hi Nikita.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. So when we conducted research, we realized people are using ton of apps. Everybody knows how to use it, but everybody struggles with how do I make decision.
What is one insight I should consider when I build my product? What would you tell them?
I would say that just because the entire country is using UPI doesn't mean they'll use your fintech product in the same way and receive it the same way. Previously, safety, privacy, security for finance was slightly different. In digital fintech world, it's again different.
So apparently you can tell the AI that you're this kind of a person in this demographic, this is the personality you have, etc. And then it can act like that.
Yeah.
And you can get research done with them. What do you feel about it? Hi everyone, this is the second time we are meeting and this is the My UX Core Not Design Talks episode 2. So today we have Nikita with us. Hi Nikita.
Hi.
How are you?
Good.
Nikita has been a good friend for a while and we keep meeting at random places. But today we are here officially.
Yes.
So welcome to the podcast, Nikita.
Thank you so much for having me.
So Nikita, you've been doing a lot of research and ethnographic studies, etc. for a while that I know of. So Nikita is the co-founder of Xenolabs. And please tell us what Xenolab does. I know it does some very cool, interesting things.
Yeah.
So we would love to hear from you though.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, first of all, for having me. It's always great to come back to your office and meet the team. So Xeno is basically a service design and social innovation consultancy. Me along with Swar, both of us co-founded it around seven and a half years ago.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it's like when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, I don't know how it's been so long already. So our vision behind starting the company was that since both of us come from design background, we studied different things in design college as well. But our vision was to use our skill sets, our inclination and interest in human-centered design, but use it in a impact space so that the kind of research or human centricity and the design processes that we are using, how can we make use of that for a positive use or for a good impact? So, and social impact was something that both of us were quite driven towards.
Right.
So that's why if you would see, we follow the typical design thinking, service design process. You can call it whatever you want, but then we follow that process and qualitative research becomes very essential part of our process. And then based on that, we try to help companies design product services, which are of course centered towards the human needs, but also create positive impact for the society, for communities. So that's basically the vision that we had.
Yeah. So would you say you are more impact driven than business driven, as in from an impact point of view, or not so much?
So I think they both go sort of hand in hand. Because if a business is oriented towards creating a impact, then if you have better impact, of course your product and service will be, so to speak, sold more, which will create a business anyways better revenue in a way, or you will have a better and wider reach. So I think it's quite correlated in a way. And also since we practice service design, which is not only talking to users and designing a product, but service design basically talks about a bigger ecosystem.
Right.
So we don't only cater to users, which is one touch point for sure, but you think of all aspects and business become a very important part of it anyways, because even if you're starting a product or a service, at the end you need to think of all the elements, different stakeholders and business side of it. Feasibility, viability, just because it looks good or just because people want it, you need to understand other aspects. So I think that's where we also come from, is that how can we make things impactful and relevant for both users, consumers, and also business side of it. So like a combination of both the elements.
So in the last 7.5 years, have you found yourself trying to convince somebody to do research?
All the time. My God, if somebody can tell me how to do that, it'll be great. But that is the constant work that goes on in any company. I think it is definitely changing what we used to struggle with in terms of educating clients that you need research. and also what research means is also very differently perceived.
True.
Whereas it goes from just like a quick A/B testing, or like just go talk to 2 users, and that's also research for somebody. Whereas for somebody, it's like 2 month long, detailed, in-depth research is also research. So
Yeah.
how do you set expectations and also tell them what is the impact it can have on the consumer's product business? So it's a constant struggle. It's changing definitely because industry is evolving differently. Awareness is changing for sure. But yeah, it's.
Is it become easier now a little bit? Not so.
I think. I mean, I don't think that I can say yes or no directly, because of course we have to keep educating people, clients.
Yeah.
So we conduct workshops, or
Yeah.
like just do like a project in a day, or
Yeah.
project in 2 days sort of a thing. So it's like a quick glimpse for them. Like you can't imagine it in a long term, because it's again a time and money investment. So let's show you how it potentially could look like in 2 days. So it's like a quick 2 day immersion of sorts.
Right.
But also now that over 7 years we have built we have worked on a multiple projects. So those case studies sort of become like a proof for them. Ki,
True.
see, we have done it in the past. It worked for that company. So maybe let's try it with you. So from all of these aspects, I would say yes, it's slightly simpler, but it's not.
But
it's still a struggle. Yeah.
Awesome. And you've previously been at Turian and Onio
Yeah.
Design, right?
Yeah.
So were you a designer there, like executor, or did you do research? And how has that shaped what Zero
Yeah.
Labs is today?
Yeah. I think from education, graduation, I'm a product designer, industrial designer. So straight out of college, I joined Onio Design, where for the first few projects, I did do product design.
Right.
But then very quickly, I was transitioned, or like I was interested more, or I became part of a team who was more doing consumer research. And I think that's the place I found human centricity a lot more relevant. So I would say that from college, or in the college while we were studying in graduation, that time we didn't have consumer research or user research as a discipline, or any kind of even a subject of that sort. So I didn't know that there is such a big world out there. That is the missing piece I was feeling, because while doing the industrial design or product design, I always used to struggle to make sense of it, that how do I decide if this is a good product just because I like the way it looks, my faculty likes the way it looks. It's not. I used to struggle with decision making. So that's why I always used to feel that this is not something I can see myself do for life. But when I joined Onio and the mentors I had and the teams that I had, I think it just made sense that, okay, if you do this piece, then designing a product or a service becomes a lot more logical and more seamless.
Right.
So I think that was definitely a big transition point in my career.
Yeah. And so one fine day you guys decided that, you know what, we're going to do this on our own.
Yeah.
Story there.
So both of us, Swar and I, both of us go a long way. Like we are friends from our design college. So we've been friends for almost now 15, 20 years of sorts. But we were studying different things. Like she was doing graphic design, I was doing product design. After product design, I was working in a different place. She was studying, and then she worked in New York and then Stockholm. So both of us were having our own journeys. And interestingly, we both found service design and human centricity from different paths.
Okay.
And then since we were always friends, we used to meet whenever she used to come back to India. We used to chat and just see what's going on. And then that's where we realized that we are thinking similarly, and we were always we wanted to use the human centricity, as I said, for social impact, which we felt that maybe we are not doing it right now in our own respective work, or there is a potential that we could just try on our own. How would it be like? Because as a child, I never dreamt that, I'm going to start a company of my own. That never came to my mind. So it just worked out organically.
Yeah.
And then we decided that let's quit our own jobs. Give it a try. So it was nice to start with a friend who was in the same boat as you.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
And I know that you guys do a lot of like core deep research, right? Tell me how that goes. Like, is it that you guys go out there, collect information? How does that whole sort of get executed, if I may say it?
Yeah, I think for research, if I have to break down the process, I think the very important part is before research time period, where we spend some time with our clients to understand what do they want to achieve from the whole
Yeah.
research, because just because you go and talk to the users is not going to take you to the place you want to, or at least try to have focus areas. So we sit with clients, conduct workshops to understand their goals, focus areas, what they want to achieve, where do they envision their company or a product to be, so we know what is the path they want to take, or they want to say understand that this is a area that we don't have understanding about, like this is a consumer behavior area that we want to build our understanding so that we can develop better products and services. So the initial planning bit becomes very crucial. That gives the like a direction for your research, because even with research, when you go and talk, you need to understand which method to use, who to talk to, how long you want to talk to,
Yes.
which methodology you want to use. So all of that is dependent on the initial discussion. So
Right.
the initial part becomes very crucial. And then when it comes to research, I think pandemic became sort of like a milestone where the things shifted quite a bit for us. Before pandemic, for a lot of years, it was essentially in-person research all the time. So we always used to go to the consumers, conduct research. So the research sprints also used to be long because, of course, you're traveling.
Yes.
Or phone calls. That was sort of like a combination.
Right.
But pandemic, all of us were forced to do remote research.
Yeah.
So everybody figured out tools and method to do it. But after pandemic, now it's become more of a intentional choice.
It's a hybrid.
That's correct. Yeah. So then you decide that for this particular topic, research area, or whatever the focus areas are, what is a more efficient way of doing it? Because few things for certain user segments, remote research works.
Right.
They are not. They don't get bothered by the medium. But for some context, some observational study or any of different context, in person is still needed. So that's where the research piece comes up.
Yeah. Got it. Tell me an interesting story when you actually went there and something fun happened with a user.
Yeah, I think it was very recently, I would say like last year. We were, since we work in the social impact space, we end up visiting a lot of villages as well, where we are talking to marginalized communities or farmers or smaller businesses in different geographies. And we were working in the space of financial inclusion, where the client was developing a fintech product to help these smaller farmers get credit, or like basically get access to loans a lot better and faster. So great intention. So we were going to the user and talking to them. So we went to, it was in Bihar, in Patna. So we were visiting one dairy farmer, and she was a lady dairy farmer. We were sitting in her farm talking to her. An initial conversation happened, get to know each other, build rapport, and then we said that now we want to we want to understand your feedback on the digital product that we are building. So we just took out some of our prototypes, which is paper printed digital screens, not phone, not live, not clickable, printouts, like drawing essentially. So when we took that out, the family, like her mother-in-law and the farmer, really got scared because of course, like all digital scams, all fintech scams that have been happening. And of course, Bihar being one of the region where the rate of like everybody going through one or the other, some financial scam is so high. So looking at digital product, even if on printed screen and a fintech, they freaked out. And then we were thrown out of the interview. They really got scared because they thought we have come there to take money from them, or their account is going to get hacked. So even after explaining that this is a paper print, we just want to know your feedback, but we had to leave the place in 10 minutes. So it's not always great and nice users. It's like a combination.
And then how did you guys actually end up collecting data, and what happened on the project?
For that project? Not all users were not like that. But yeah, so I think that was an extensive research. So we were conducting research in 4 geographies. So UP, Bihar, Karnataka, Ahmedabad. So our teams were traveling in different regions. Right. So what happens is that since geographies like 4 geographies, then overall we also spoke to around 60-70 participants. Okay. So when we conduct research with so many people, also talking to different contexts, say dairy farmers or smaller kirana store owners or like a pan store owner. So I think when we go and talk to these people, I think because the sample size was big, different teams were traveling. So I think that collection of data really helps.
Right.
Also, just assuring the participant whenever such research is happening, because I mean, I explain that story as, of course, as a funny story, because for us, it's a funny story, but they come from very real fears that
True.
because for them all financial scams happen on phone.
Yeah.
So if that is the understanding, so it becomes, as researchers, it becomes our responsibility to understand where are they coming from.
True.
Because for us it might be very irrational. Nothing is going to get hacked from the paper.
Yeah.
But then that also helped us in building narrative for the research as well. Is that even if you're going for research, how do you introduce yourself? How do you set the context ki why the research is happening? What are we going to do with your feedback? Is your feedback and whatever information you share, how confidential is it going to be?
Right.
We are not going to share it on social media or share it with anybody. So it helps us build our protocols a lot better, because at the end it's your, as a researcher's, responsibility to make user feel safe, because for you they are one participant in 60 people.
Yes.
But for them, it's like somebody, a strange person from another city has come. So I think that helps. So a lot of like this people management, how to speak with somebody or not, what not to say, what to say. I think that really helps in understanding.
Yeah, that's very cool, because there's also a lot of bias in research, right? It's a big topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Any research is always biased in some way or the other. I don't know. What do you think about that? Do you guys actively try to remove that, or do you think it's like we can't get rid of bias ever?
I mean, yeah, it's difficult to answer. Like, how do you get rid of biases? Because it's humanly very difficult. Like, how much ever we say that I'm very open-minded, or I don't judge a person based on what the choice is or what the user is saying, and I don't put my filter over it. It's after a point, it's humanly, it's very difficult. You have to reach at a certain level for that. But I think what happens and what helps is, how do you incorporate diverse point of view? If it's single person doing research, then the chances of that personal biases coming in is higher. But if you are have a team, that already reduces the biases, because everyone comes from different backgrounds, different biases. And that too, if you have a team which is sort of diverse from different point of views, then everyone comes from different point of views. So the way you would analyze something is different. So there again, the biases reduces. And secondly, also from the consumer side, when you are selecting a sample, or when you're selecting which participants or consumer segment you should talk to, so you try to also create a diversity within that. That makes sure, if it permits your product, make sure that you have diversity of age in your participants, research participants, gender, geographies. So all of these things also, then the feedback also that you're getting also becomes sort of a mix bag, which it's easy for you to look at and then try to make a common sense out of it. Because if it's a very singularly thought consumer, then the feedback, because consumers also will have their own biases. So just trying to see how diverse point of views, diverse team members come into the picture, the better chances of at least toning down the biases help.
And so I think today a lot of research is used for decision making, like you said, right? Do you think, like, how do you make sense of all that research that is collected to come to a conclusion or a decision? It's a big question, but like trying to understand, like you have all this data and then what happens?
Yeah, so basically how I would say is that research should technically, as you said, should help you make your decisions, or even it should inform some kind of decision making, and should inform some kind of intuition that helps you make those decisions. So what we also do is that whenever we are talking to people, the insights that we get, there is a big difference between observation converting into insight and that converting into like a recommendation, a business recommendation. Because if I just go observe something and if I just tell the client ki, okay, ye aisa chal raha hai, this is the thing that I've observed, people live in this way, for them they'll go like, so what, like so what do we do with this information? So that's the change in articulation that we have to keep having, that how do you translate a piece of information which is just observation that a particular, for example, this couch looks like this. People have such couches.
Yeah.
They have this color couches, for example.
Yeah.
So this is observation. So how do you translate it to insight? What does it mean?
Yeah.
What is it? Why people are selecting such kind of a couch, for example,
Yes.
or why such colors are working? If I have to like tone it, like make it, give you an example for a physical product perspective.
Yeah.
So trying to understand reasons behind consumer choices, and then how do you convert those choices or insights that you understand into like the behaviors that you observe into what does it mean for business.
Right.
So that's the researcher's also job, but also that is the point where we incorporate point of views and even collaboratively build those recommendations with client.
Yeah.
So translating those insights into business directions is like, so what does it mean for business?
Yeah.
How can you make use of this insight to either create better experiences, solve some pain points, or create some new experiences for that matter? So
Yeah.
I think translating insights into recommendation is what the journey is like.
That's the core valuable for the business, right?
Correct.
That's what they get out of it.
Correct.
Have you seen any example where it had a huge impact on business, like in any of the projects that you all did?
Yes, so I think it's been like I think some time, a year or a half ago, where we were supporting a company who already had a fintech product for marginalized communities or smaller business owners from rural context. So it could be like a tailor or a kirana store owner, but they were targeting women mostly because their intention was how can we make that fintech product offering that they were having to increase access and autonomy of the woman to make decision. So that was the intention. So it was a digital product that we went for, that we were going for testing. And then when we went to the field to conduct research, we realized that the intention of the client and the company was great. Like that is perfect that they are trying to achieve. But we realized that the context was, there was a slight difference because we understood that women do have smartphone, but are they using it? Do they have the autonomy to make decision ki, okay, I can apply for loan on my own, or there is a family sitting behind who is telling her what to do, who doesn't have a say of her own? Or is it always a combined decision? That is it like her and her husband, both of them are taking decisions together all the time? So we understood, the research helped us understand their ecosystem, their dynamics. So that even though the client was thinking of digital product as one touch point to solve the problem, we realize it's a ecosystem level thing that needs to be tackled as well. So research really helped us in that. It also helped us in mapping what are the other channels that can be used. Like smartphone and an app is one, but after you understand that the woman, even if she has a smartphone, one, is she the owner?
Yeah.
Even if the phone is on her name, is she does the phone is with her all the time, or her husband takes her, she just on her name, or does she know how to use it beyond just picking up phone calls? And you are designing a app for them. So they're still feature phone users. So how do you make use of these different channels as well to provide the service? So all of these different aspects is what we sort of figured out through research.
Yeah.
So that
It's
really
very
helped.
interesting because usually we do many things in isolation, like sitting at a desk designing for a user whose ecosystem might be so different.
Correct.
And making product decisions for them.
Yeah.
Then and it changes completely when you actually see their world.
Correct.
On how their ecosystem is, right?
Yeah.
So that's super interesting that research insight can, affect or help us make an informed decision.
Definitely.
So Nikita, we were just talking about the conference last year, right? The Global Finance Summit.
Yeah.
And you guys presented a very interesting paper on financial inclusion. I think it is so important in today's day because with the growth of fintech products, to understand the Indian user in all its diverse layers, and like understand their psychology. How did that go? What do you think are the applications of that?
You mean the applications of the product?
The insights from the research on financial inclusion.
I think the financial inclusion context that whatever we work in are mostly in the either marginalized communities or in the peri-urban areas. So consumers living in those regions. So maybe a few years back, they were not so much considered or included in the mainstream when you think of a digital product.
Right.
It's always like urban user, educated user. But now, since the past few years, or rather almost a decade, India has been going through the digital revolution part. Which is making financial or any digital products very accessible for a lot of people.
Yes.
And thanks to a lot of social media apps, communication apps, entertainment apps, the understanding of how to use digital products is also increasing in all communities and markets. How they use it is very different. Like how a urban, like you and I, using a product is very different than how a woman sitting in the rural area using that product. Her understandings of concepts, icons, interactions is all different. So I think the kind of work we are doing with, thankfully, with some of our very great clients is that helping us build understanding of those behaviors.
Yeah.
Not only socio-cultural behaviors, but also digital behaviors. That sometimes for us, some icon is very straightforward, but that icon means very differently for somebody else. So I think that research and behavioral understanding is helping build that digital product, for sure. And as I said before, is that research is not only limited to users. We need to understand ecosystem. And there are a lot of factors that come into it. User is one very important pillar, but still one pillar. You need to understand infrastructure, you need to understand socio-cultural background, economic background, or even the company side stakeholders, what are the business goals and etc. So I think through research also you end up understanding how do you make that product accessible to the consumers.
Yes.
So what is a good channel? Because these are the infrastructural limitations that maybe exist. This is a struggle that that person has from her, say, socio-cultural background. So when you understand this holistic thing, then that fintech product becoming accessible to people becomes a lot more simpler.
Yeah.
Also, just to quickly add to that is also, when it comes to finance, it's already very touchy part, right? Whatever we do, it's still slightly touchy. Touchy when I say it's in terms of the privacy that somebody would want on their finance or financial decisions, or safety that they want to feel, the security, and all of these aspects. These are very important aspects.
Yeah.
It always existed. Previously, safety, privacy, security for finance was slightly different. In digital fintech world, it's again different. So we need to understand all of these layers as well for all consumers. So that's where we also did, like, the presentation for the conference was also in a way talking about what does it mean to design for people who have been unheard or unseen so far, and then how do you make use of their behaviors to actually design products for them.
In today's day, if a fintech startup were to ask you what is one insight I should consider when I build my product, what would you tell them?
Oh my God. I would say that just because somebody can use UPI and just because the entire country is using UPI doesn't mean they'll use your fintech product in the same way and receive it the same way.
Right.
Because financial concepts are so differently understood by everybody. Financial literacy in our country is also not the best.
Yeah.
We do understand partially, but not the best. So I think one important insight is that it's not about if somebody can use it and move forward in your journey, but it's more about what are they understanding of the concept. So that is something
What
like
is their perspective of it?
Correct. Or even if, for example, we were recently working for conducting research for to understand how does wealth management look like in our country. So what we realized, and now there are so many apps that all of us urban users use it for investments and market and tracking and all of that. So when we conducted research and we did like quantitative also, so we spoke to, I think, almost 180 participants. We realized people are using a ton of apps. Everybody knows how to use it.
Yeah.
So tactically everybody understands, but everybody struggles with how do I make decision?
Yeah.
What does a particular concept in stock market or in your mutual funds or anything mean? So that financial understanding does not always translate into financial decision making. People make decisions, but it's like that financial understanding is something that is not common. So it's important to work for that.
Yeah. So would you say that digital literacy is higher than financial literacy? in our country?
I don't have data to say yes or no, but I would say at least in the digital, when we look at it, unfortunately, most of the people, when we say digitally, it's more usability.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's not that only. It's also comprehending the
What's
things that you have written. That I giving permission to use my data or like accepting cookies or rejecting cookies for that matter, I can do it. I can select some option. But do I understand what it means?
True.
Is the difference.
Yeah.
So when it translates to financial also, it's the same that I'm buying 2 stocks, but how do I decide when to sell, for example, is one part.
Yeah.
I know how to do it. I can do it and I can just see कि okay graph ऊपर जा रहा है तो मैं I'll take certain decisions, but that's the I think difference that how do you
Accessibility has become higher to information and
Yeah.
everything, but understanding of that information may or may not be at par.
the same,
right?
correct.
Got it.
So yeah, and then not a lot of people are working towards that, at least based on my understanding, is that all of us want to build products which are usable, which are easy to understand, but are we focusing just on the tactical usability part of it? Or are we also making sure that we are helping people make decisions?
Do you think there is any business use case or relevancy in worrying? And this might sound very skeptical, but like, why would a business leader worry about impact or educating the user? What is in it for them?
It's also, if you think about it from a very business-minded perspective, it's at the end, everybody wants growth. Everybody wants scale.
That's the bottom line.
Correct. So that gives you, say, revenue. That gives you consistency. That makes your company last for whatever X number of years that you have envisioned. Or you want to build a legacy for that matter. So I think at the end, it's all about... So we see a lot of startups, for example, that the success is like... The graph is insane when it starts. But then it's a classic, people say that how many startups who succeed in like first 2 years, how long do they last? So I think the scale and the longevity is also dependent on this thing, that you will get great response in the beginning because it's a novel idea or people have not seen it before, or you just made their life simple. But then if you don't think what or what next, how do you move forward from there? That is where the business also lies, that if people are able to use it, but if they after a point, if they think that samajh mein nahi aa raha hai, or it's just becoming now I don't know what to do, then the drop-offs might happen and things like that. So at the end, if you don't think of the impact or think of how users can perceive a few things than just using it, then it eventually will
die down.
Or impact your growth and scale and of course revenue.
So would you say in the longer term it makes sense to worry about users' well-being for business also?
Of course, because you're selling your product or a service to who? They're going to use it.
Exactly.
And if the acceptance is low, and it doesn't mean that because a lot of companies also measure their success by number of downloads, for example.
Right.
But then do we count number of uninstallments, or do we see the consistent use or the drop-offs and things like that?
Right.
So I think those elements also matter, is that for longevity or impact. So you'll have to think of consumers. You can't not think of consumers.
And so the data-driven decision making, like you're saying, number of downloads, they tell half of the story, right?
Correct.
How do you sort of complete the story with quantitative information and qualitative things to back it up? Like, how does one, like, let's say I'm a product leader, how do I look at numbers and qualitative information to make sense of the whole story?
Yeah. I think what we do is that we try to give reasonings for the data that you see. So data will tell you ki the downloads are increasing or reducing, or you see in the journey, this is a point where most of the drop-offs are happening, or in this section we are getting the maximum traction and things like that. So it gives you black and white data, which is great starting point for a qualitative research. So, but what qualitative and in-depth research will give you is the reasons for it. That why is it happening, or why this is not working, or why this is working. so that you can learn from the reasons and then work towards that. If something is not working, then you need to think a different way of doing it. Or if you know, okay, this is working great, and why, like what is it that is
Making it
people like it or use it more, then you can make use of that understanding and behavioral understanding. So qualitative research gives you reasons for why, because there is a lot of like sentimental, psychographical, a lot of things which are going on in people's mind when you are actually using the product.
Right.
That is how we try to combine it. So once you know the reasons behind it, maybe that helps you also take better decisions the next time.
Right.
Which helps in either again trying out a different way कि ठीक है यहाँ का drop off कम कर सकते हैं तो or why, like sometimes a designer takes a decision but for a user it is not working and there is a drop off कि this is either there is a fatigue or there is some scare or they are not understanding what is happening, so just exiting is a safer option, for example. So if you know why, if we know that the drop off is happening because they are worried about their data, for example, and that point you're asking for some information and they don't want to give and that's why they're exiting, then you know how to communicate better and things
So you
like
can solve a problem when you know why it exists. Not just with the numbers.
correct. The numbers will tell you there is a problem, which is great. So then you need to dig further. Then you need to expand it on that point.
And so in today's pace of things, like we all feel it, right? Things are changing fast. Products have to be out like that. You can't do a 6-month sprint anymore, right? Things will change in 6 months. How does research fall into this speed? Like, because a lot of times it's a difficult decision to make for a product leader that, okay, should I invest time and effort in research right now because I need this to get out in the market? Like, how do you tackle that?
Yeah, it's very
tough one.
I mean, as researchers and also as a research heavy company, we struggle that a lot because it's sad but reality that especially post pandemic, you also see how tech world is changing with the layoffs, reprioritization of your budgets to certain things over the other directly is impacting research industry, definitely. The priorities of people and companies have changed so much is that before pandemic, as I said, we used to do all in-field research. So the researchers used to be like nice. It was a great time. But then, of course, it makes sense. You need to evolve with the time and the pace at which companies are working. So then it came like shorter sprints. But now we are also seeing very like really rapid turnaround. Like literally 2 weeks and we want everything out. So we have had requests from very big tech companies as well, requesting certain things like this, that we need to ship just 2 weeks, do everything, give it to us, we need to move forward. So I understand where they come from, but then I think what needs to be paid attention to is the intention for it. That the fast research can give you certain output and deep research and in-depth research can give you certain output. So it needs to be very intentional decision and choice of the company to decide which research to pick when. If you, just because you want to meet the timelines and the shipping date or whatever, if you're trying to do the 2 days research for your behavioral study, then it's just a mismatch. Then you're just wasting time, money, energy of everybody. So there are different methods. Of course, we can do quick research, all of that. But why you're doing which method and when is very crucial. That's where the struggle is right now. Because a lot of companies these days come to us with bigger visions, but they never have time or budget. So then setting expectations ki itne mein we can't go in that depth. But this scope is great. You should spend time on this. Then you will get really good efforts, which will eventually have impact on your product and acceptance of the product. Exactly. So it's that, like, it's heartbreaking to see that. So we need to, it's also like a negotiation that you make them understand ki for this scope, what is it that you should do. But for really big international tech companies, of course, they have their own limitations. We have limitations to even recommend a few things for them, but things are very drastically changing rapidly.
And so, of course, everyone wants to talk about AI, right? It will and is
You can't
changing.
not talk about
Yeah, you
it.
can't not. It's like reality now.
Correct.
How is it changing how you do research, right? How are your processes changing with these kind of tools out there?
Yeah, I think we are trying our best to adapt to the changes, but still, how much ever we try, it feels that we have not explored enough. I'm sure there are so many other tools and ways people are trying that maybe we have not experimented yet. But what has changed? Has our processes changed? Yes, it has. Because now with AI, there are a lot of research tools which are coming, which is helping you do a lot of different tasks
Yes.
through these tools, right from recruiting participants for research
Okay.
to AI moderated interviews are there. There are platforms which are helping you analyze data, synthesize data, and of course, creating reports also.
Yes,
So,
yes.
essentially, at all stages in the process, we have a tool.
Yeah.
The efficiency of it, all of that is again up to the discussion.
Right.
But for us in our company, what we are doing is we are trying to use these tools to reduce the manual effort where the time goes a lot.
Correct.
So right now for us, we are at a stage where we are using these tools as an efficiency improvement points.
Right.
So after when we come back from the research, we have really like a lot of data, right, from a lot of interview videos or audio files or notes.
Yeah.
So there is just a lot. And when we do research in 4 states and 60 participants, it's a lot.
Correct.
So we used to take a lot of time to assimilate that data and make some, put it down in some way. So we have started using tools for that primarily, quite heavily, where we are trying to, that data management sorting happens quite better.
Yeah.
There are tools which also help you synthesize and make sense of the data, which so far, at least on our experience, based on the experience and the tools that we have experimented with, we felt that the synthesis is not yet reached. It's still on meta tagging.
Sure.
And then the tagging still happens on a very linear way. It doesn't sometimes answer why, and that deeper discussions or like a few things that you have observed in the field, or a few things that you had observed in the body language, or some, as I said before, like research helps you build that informed intuition. So that intuition part gets missed in the synthesis. So all of these humane qualities are still not there.
Yeah.
I don't know if it will be achieved some other time.
Yeah.
So that is the place that we are not, we are trying to experiment, but not so much.
Okay.
But we are using at a points where the efficiency can be improved, so we can do more work in lesser efforts and lesser time.
That also ties into your speed of
Correct.
turnover.
Yeah,
in
yeah,
terms of
yeah.
research. Got
No,
it.
correct.
And I recently saw this tool called Synthetic Users, which we were talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
So apparently you can tell the AI that, you're this kind of a person in this demographic, this is the personality you have, etc. And then it can act like that.
Yeah.
And you can like get research done with them. What do you feel about it? Is it weird?
It sounds, yeah, I mean, like it doesn't feel okay.
Yeah.
Because of course, like AI can pick up traits from a lot of available data and will know the psyche and everything. But I feel in certain context, this still will not work because there still is not enough data out there for the AI to learn from.
Right.
Maybe for a certain user segment, certain geographies, I don't know, because personally we have not used this tool, so we have not experienced it firsthand.
Right.
But it feels for certain geographies, certain demographics, where the data is out there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's still closer to the reality, but a lot of like deeper context in India, for example, unexplored markets, it's a little questionable things.
Very interesting. It would be so weird if they could.
Yeah, because I cannot imagine, say, like a pan wala at a tapri in a peri-urban or tier 3 village city of India. Maybe that person has a lot of deep-rooted cultural, socio-cultural, family.
They're not out there.
Gender related. There's so many things which may or may not be out there.
Yes.
So these things.
So would you say that data collection at its core would still be something that AI may not be able to do right now?
Oh, I mean,
where do you see it going, like research in this whole realm
yeah.
with AI? How do you see it changing?
Yeah, I think for the entire design process, definitely at every point AI will be incorporated and included. I think it's going to be more about how we moderate that
Right.
and how you're managing it, because what we feel, even if we do like AI moderated interviews, you have observational studies or these things, but I think few things that you sense and feel will still take time for AI to learn from. That if I go into someone's house, how I feel about it.
That's a lot of data actually.
Correct. When I see that, okay, this is my participant, but how is she talking to her family? How are family members talking to her?
Yeah.
So these non-verbal communication will take time, I think, for AI to pick up from. And the second thing I think will take time is the curiosity
Yeah.
that maybe we inherently have, all of us have, where, for example, when you come back from the research and there are like these outliers, so researchers, like outliers are very commonly talked about, that just like there was just this one person who behaved differently.
Yeah.
So you maybe data might just say, okay, this is an outlier, let's keep it on the side, but
there was that person.
Correct. So then as a user or as a researcher or as a designer or businessman, we would think that why? Like, this is so different. Then curiosity and then digging deeper into that is something might take time for the AI to learn from, to learn as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Because like the tools definitely still create, like if you ask the tool to synthesize data, they will, and they'll create a separate bucket which just says outlier.
Okay.
So they'll put all outliers in one because they can't like delete data, right?
Correct.
It'll just recluster it.
Yeah.
So you see the bucket of outliers, but that ki why? Like, what is this? Why is this person should not behave like this? Why is this coming up? So things like that. So I think that also is a very human quality.
Yes, true.
Either AI will learn someday, but
Feels like it.
It'll take time. But yeah, it's more about moderation and how
like
we
keeping
use
that
it.
quality of the depth of the insight.
Yeah.
So Nikita, now we're going to play a game of A/B test.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I think so.
So I'll give you a scenario,
Okay.
and then I'll give you a A and a B.
Okay.
And then you choose
Pick
either.
one.
And then you can also say why you picked that, because depth and research.
Sure.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing is user research in a startup situation. A, invest time and effort in research on a small budget. B, skip primary research and refer to secondary information.
A.
Okay. Why?
I think I already spoke a lot, but I think if you're a startup, because you need to know who you are doing it for, and if it's a new idea, then there's a lot of foundational research. But if you don't have budget, you don't have to go like 6 months long research. There can be a smarter way to do it, but skipping it is not advisable.
Okay, cool. Second one, using AI in research, and we spoke about this, but would you choose A, no go, don't use AI, too much bias, or B, it's reliable and quick, but be careful?
B.
B.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Third one is the speed of decision making. So A, would you delay decisions to do more research and user tests in depth? Or B, would you stick to the deadlines and move ahead with assumptions?
I would, if I can, I would like to edit the B.
Okay.
It's like, I wouldn't say that just skip the research and just move forward with whatever you have, but not with assumptions.
Okay.
There is a way to also split the research in smaller parts. So we can still stick to timeline, but if you can't achieve everything, then break it down.
Okay.
Do smaller
So like a balance
sprints.
between. So like A-B.
Correct. Because realistically, you can't just ask any company to forget about timelines. We need this time to do research. It's an unrealistic ask.
Cool. Okay. Okay, the next one is budget constraints in research. So would you A, do small ethnographic studies for deep insights, or B, use a quick online survey to get data?
It basically depends on the context, like why you're doing research, what you want to learn from, because both the methods will work out, but it's not replaceable.
Got it. They are not all apples and apples.
It's not either or.
Okay.
Because in-depth research, quick research can be done for a certain things, and online research is great and valid for certain things. So I would say it's both, depending on what is the point or the goal that we want to achieve.
Okay. And the last one is reducing bias in research. So A, would you use AI to spot bias in the research data or the insights? Or B, would you use manual people to do it?
I would say, do you think if AI is unbiased?
Everyone
If so, then it's the same.
might as well.
Because AI is also built on currently, so far where we are, it's built on certain level of bias data,
Correct.
which is coming from people. So it's there.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, I don't know how can I pick.
Can never reduce bias. None of these.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure. Like maybe people,
Okay.
because even with biases, there still can be discussions, and you can try to correct each other or try to have an argument. With maybe AI, I'm not sure if you can, as a research team, I can't like train that AI tool ki nahi aapka ye bias hai, now work in a different way because this bias I need to take off. We are not in the position to edit the biases in the AI.
Right.
Or that tool specifically.
Yet.
So that's why, yeah.
Yeah.
Or like people who are developing those languages, I think can edit it. So I'm thinking purely from a consulting company perspective.
Sure.
Who uses tools which have been given by the company. So
If I would give you a AI research entity who is trained to ask questions to you or argue with you or, you know, highlight bias when it sees it in themselves or you, would you use it?
yeah, why not? Definitely. But I wouldn't replace it with all team members that we have.
So the team might use it?
Yeah, why not? That's a good, like, if there is like somebody who's just asking you questions and so I think anything that triggers conversations, I think is great, as long as there is conversation.
So you were open to AI who can have a conversation?
Oh, that's a very open-ended question. I was talking purely from the research, but yeah, of course there has to be some guardrails and all of those, but why not? If out of 5 members, if it's one AI member who is just there to
You let them
cross question, it's fine. But it's not replaceable yet, at least.
Yet.
Unfortunately, yet is like everywhere constant.
Who knows? In the next 6 months, have a team of AI.
No, I'm trying to be very optimistic.
So you'll have a team of AI researchers and a team of people.
Yeah, correct.
Cool. So coming to the last part of the burning question.
Okay.
And this is a question which has been building up in our conversation. So, I mean, it might have been answered, but just to summarize.
Okay.
In today's age of the speed of how fast product development happens with AI, of course, and even using AI for development, would and should a product leader or a tech leader invest in research, and how much in terms of time? Is it relevant?
Of course. I mean, even if we are developing products and services very rapidly, like every other day there is a new launch, a new feature launch, or pipeline is like packed all the time for companies. I think giving an answer of how much time or how long the research would be, I don't think is the right, we can't generalize it. But I think, yes, we should definitely invest time, money, whatever is needed. But again, as I said, there are smarter ways to do that. At what point, not every time for every launch, we don't need a 6 months long research. It's a wrong perception. So it's again like, how do you pick at what? So it depends a lot on like, if it's a company, what stage are you in? Are you just starting, or you already have a product, you just want to improvise that, or you want to change the trajectory of your company through different product, introducing different channels or different products. So depending on who you are, where you are in your company's journey, product cycle, and then deciding what kind of research makes sense. Because I think the misunderstanding, I would say, is that when we talk about research, we very solely think of it as user research and user feedback.
Which is not the case.
Which is not the case. It is very important, but it's not only important. It's not the only thing. So user research, unfortunately, everybody thinks that, okay, I have a product, I want to go ask people if they can use it. It's not that. It is way beyond that. You need to think of even your company stakeholders. Like even if you are, for example, introducing a new product line altogether, are your company internally ready for it? It's not only about infrastructurally, but also a lot of teams related questions could come up and things like that. So there are a lot of different elements of the research. The research purpose is to inform your decision making, inform your intuition. So it's not only user testing is not equivalent to research. It's a part of it. So if you think of it from a bigger perspective, yes, you should invest time and efforts. But again, you don't always need 2 months, 6 months long research. You can have shorter ones if you know what you want to achieve and when you want to achieve what.
Got it. Awesome. So Nikita, thank you for making the time today, and thank you to Xenolabs also, because your insights have been super interesting today. And thank you all for listening, and we'll be back with another episode soon.